I am making a smoker out of a propane tank. It's a 150-gallon tank that I bought off Facebook Marketplace. The guy said it was empty, but, who knows. First I wanted to remove all the fittings so I could fill it up with water. The purpose of the water is to push any residual propane out of the tank. Here you can see there was still just a little bit of propane left in the tank. But, it seems safe enough. Option number 1 for cutting this thing apart was to use my plasma torch. Option number 2 was a grinding disc on a grinder. Option 3 was a sawzall. And after much frustration, I decided to use option number 2, the cutoff disc. And it's kind of funny that all the difficulties I had was because I chose to cut it where it's double in thickness, and there's a backing strap where the end cap is welded onto the tube. So the lesson is, cut about 1 inch from the existing weld. When I'm not cutting where the thickness is double, it cuts pretty decently. Here I'm trying to cut the tank to 48 inches long. This is going to be a reverse flow smoker, so I need to cut a piece of plate to go on the bottom of the smoke box. It's a bit heavy, so I'm using my shop crane to move it to the sawhorses. I have a video where I make these heavy-duty sawhorses. Please check out the link in the upper right. The plate that goes in the bottom of the cook chamber forces the smoke to go underneath and then back up through the meat, so it makes a really even temperature in the smoker. There was a bunch of who knows residue in the tank, so I stick welded it and I wore a respirator just in case. Now I'm going to cut out the circular ends that go on each side of the smoker. Somehow the amperage got turned down on the plasma cutter without me knowing it, but when I figured that out, it started cutting pretty decent. The propane tank is not perfectly circular, but a little persuasion makes it fit right. I have a weight set in the shop, and those deadlifts occasionally come in pretty handy. This is the side of the cooking chamber where the firebox will attach. There was a few gaps, and I decided it was going to be much easier to weld it laying on the ground. I'm using the cutoff of the propane tank as the actual firebox. My plan is to have the firebox have a flat top, and here I'm cutting it apart to have the appropriate shape. I didn't know what residual tension was left in the tank from the manufacturing process, so I thought it might be best to weld on the plate before I completely cut it apart. This is the front of the firebox. I did a bunch of work on this later on in the project. If I was doing it again, I would do all the work on this piece before I actually welded it up. Once I had the top and the front of the firebox welded on, I went ahead and completed cutting it apart and welding on the other side. I did think ahead and thought now's a good time to weld in the fire grates. This is where the burning wood for the barbecue will sit. Again, I chose stick welding because of all the junk inside the tank. Once I had the firebox put together, I welded it up to the smoke chamber. Once again, the shop crane came in very handy. I got everything aligned, and then it was inspected by my dog, and she says she approves. And so does the other dog. Time to weld the two parts together. I ended up tacking that red brace on there to keep the firebox perpendicular to the smoke box. Now I'm working on the legs. I got them plumb in both directions and tacked them on. And the smoker comes off the sawhorses for the first time. Now it's time to cut open the smoke chamber. I'm using this piece of angle iron as a guide to try to make the cut as straight as possible. Now I'm welding on the trim that goes on the opening. It's some 2" by 8" thick flat bar. And these are the beginning of the hinges. There's a piece of 5/8 rod that goes inside some 1/2" pipe, and the 1/2" pipe will be welded to the tank. And the lid will rotate around the 5/8 rod. Once I got the hinges tacked on, I cut open the rest of the lid. I tacked a piece of scrap onto the lid so I could get a little bit of leverage. And the smoker is open for the first time. I bet that smoke is the perfect flavor for some yummy barbecue. Now I'm making the opening to the firebox. A lot of the next work is stuff that I wish I'd done when it was on the workbench, which I mentioned previously. This hinge is very similar to the 2 hinges I put on the smoke chamber lid. I had some issues getting the hinges aligned for the cooking chamber, so I decided to use my mill to create a spacer that was the correct thickness. The milled spacer made tacking this hinge on much easier. Here I'm using a metal ruler and the help of my daughter to mark out the bottom of the opening. And since the hinge is on, I'm going to cut out the rest of the firebox door. I've made another smoker and I haven't been too excited about the air vent. So on this one I'm trying a new design. And after actually using the smoker, it works out really good. There's another piece of plate with complementary openings, and it rotates around and allows the adjustment of airflow. Now I'm working on the firebox door handle, and you know you got to keep life exciting. And here the handle that we just made is being welded onto the door. So here's the firebox door in all its glory. That's the adjustment of the air vent, and this is the latch for the door. A few more tasks and this barbecue is complete. Time to weld on the expanded metal that the barbecue actually sits on while it cooks. This is some scrap I had laying around in the back. It's a little bent up, so it needs a little bit of persuasion to stay flat. Next up is the smokestack. This is some more scrap 6-inch pipe. You can see it used to be a fence post. There's residual concrete from when I pulled it out of the ground. This is the hole in the side of the smoker where the smokestack will be attached. The pipe is fixtured up and ready to weld. And like magic, it's now welded up. I'm using the crane to hold it there while I weld it on. Last step is to make the wheels. This was the part of the project that I put the most thought into. I had a lot of different ideas, but in the end, this is what I did. The 2-inch by 1/8-inch flat bar bends pretty easily around the wheel. Now I'm marking off and cutting where the flat bar will join. Some persuasion, and it's time to tack it up. I completely welded up the flat bar to the inner plate, more for aesthetics than anything else. And here is the completed smoker. You can see what makes it a reverse flow. It has the firebox and the smokestack on the same side, with a piece of plate forcing the smoke to go down the bottom and up the top. A thermometer just to keep track of your temperature. The firebox and my vent are working pretty good. And some pork ribs and some pork steak are cooking away. Yum. Thanks for watching. Please rate, comment, subscribe. Have a blessed day.